A Love Story 4. You. This is not my story. I will not put my name on it nor otherwise stake a claim to it. Instead, I alone convey it and craft it together from colorful fractured shards of ancient tiles crushed in an unfortunate seismic event and further demolished through the process of agonizing disintegration. After digging through the ruins of this once glorious structure, presumably a building of some importance, under an angled section of the collapsed ceiling supported by a solitary remaining column, I brushed aside the dirt and broken bricks found underfoot. I discovered a large, beautiful, not quite intact tiled mosaic floor. It's here, in this space devoid of daylight, I attempt putting the remains together and make sense of the narrative before me told in picture form. Fixing my lower eyelids and squinting through the dimness and dark shadows within this disembodied edifice, I scanned through the glyphs in aims of entering into the mind of the original artist. Most certainly a gifted creator, this industrial and hard-working, thoughtful interject labored through sheer force of imagination, dutifully for months, perhaps longer, to place in the right place a single tile at a time, meticulously creating this floor decoration. The chronicled collage of storytelling images told by this form of consciousness is catastrophically, at present, semi-buried, cracked apart, and whole uneven vestiges ripped away. Where I discovered missing tiles, I'll sift through the loose pieces found close by, looking for the original dislodged shape, puzzling through the debris on site like a master jigsaw puzzle champion. When that supply depleted, I drew from my batch of assorted similar glossed chips collected over my travels, reserved for such work. With some degree of speculation on my part, I closely matched the hues and lay out a version of the unseen, using as my pole star the previous artist's narrative style and artistic voice. Wherever this wisdom wavers, I pull from my acute memory of the surviving mosaic floors seen by my own eyes and vibrant historical illustrations found in places of knowledge and wisdom, or over many expeditions to prominent temples of comprehension and worship. Where entire sections of the glyphs are missing outright from the innovative allegory, I first psychologically rough out a vivid outline, leveraging all accumulated knowledge of famous or notable lore, mythos, and the hero's journey. I use every prescient or prognostic example found useful after exploring all of my carefully curated and cataloged material shelved in the backroom archive of my own private mental hall of study. Bright, newly glazed argil pieces pressed into the pasty mortar at the last to fill the void. Although at present it is my hand that dexterously dictates the path the pen takes, stroking the lines, drawing the shapes, manufacturing the letters, forming the words, and my jurisdiction choosing how to organize those words into coherent sentences on the page before me. I command you to firmly secure it in your own mind. This is not my story. This inspired, fanciful fictional story, composed from pigmented fragments, is a true love story, focused around the lives of a hero and a maiden. Consistent with tradition, it begins with once upon a time. However, this is an injustice, as all folklore and myths possess that certain quality of timelessness. Therefore, this story could be set in the past, as once upon a time implies. Perhaps even during the time this now ruined premises was a house of high meaning and importance. Or it could be set in the future, because true love stories transcend place and time. Once upon a time, there was this young guy. He lives in a megacity, a conurbation. If based on a future version of Earth, it would not be a futuristic New York, but someplace considerably larger and more densely populated. Instead, picture in your head a futuristic Tokyo, Shanghai, or Delhi, Sao Paulo, or alternatively Lagos. His name matters not, so for the sake of the story, we'll just call him Polo. This man, our hero, is tall, strong, rugged, works hard, and lives a purpose-filled, healthy life. Handsome, able, and intelligent, he frequently dons stylish hats and walks the world confidently with swagger, panache, and distinction. One day, tasked at the last moment before a long holiday weekend, Polo goes on a mission to fetch a specialized part at a custom-made manufacturing shop for a machine his boss accidentally broke while visiting a client. The errand has him navigating through a particularly crowded section of this massive city, a section he never goes, as it's not in the direction of anywhere else he travels. There is this young girl, our maiden, who also lives in this megacity. She is a vivacious, nurturing, joyful, beautiful girl, healthy and fit. Like many women, her style identifiably expresses itself through fashion, particularly when it comes to her collection of fashionable yet practical handbags and purses. Her name will be Marka. That exact same warm holiday weekend, Marka, too, is on a special errand. Hers is to go and retrieve a package sent by a family member who accidentally mailed it to the wrong address. This task puts her on a trail traveling through the same busy section of town in the opposite direction, a part of the city where she, too, never goes. In the most crowded of crowded city squares, he plows his way through the sea of busy people from one side and her the same from the other. They collide somewhere near the center. They collide with such a force it knocks the hat from his head and the purse from her arm to the ground below. With the purse landing closest to his feet and the hat to hers, they each quickly, politely bend down and recover the item for the other. While handing the object over, their youthful eyes meet. They are at once stunned, each mesmerized by what they see. They start to talk and the conversation effortlessly flows. The two soon realize they have many things in common. They share many of the same quirky, unique interests. They continue to talk to each other standing together in the center of the square while the swarms of people jostle them. They remain standing firmly in place, unfazed by the chaos around them, and talk until the sun goes down. So wildly attracted to each other are they that simply sniffing the surrounding air about the other elicits a primal hindbrain limbic response like an aphrodisiac. Due to the raw magnetism, a fascination of their collective compatibility, and because of a harmonious resonance ringing like a bell vibrating in each of their heads going undetected by the ears, they agree to continue talking over a meal. Afterwards, they go for a walk in a nearby park, getting to know each other deeper in the passing moments. They stay together all through the night, at one point sitting on a park bench for hours on hours, talking, holding each other, and staring deep into the clear, dark wells of their eyes for long periods of comfortable silence. When they finally have their first kiss, it is at first softly, tenderly, gently, sensual, and brief, but soon turns lasciviously lustful, amorous, intensely salacious, and licentious, and once under locomotion, a flow state is achieved, then all sense of time is lost. That elusive, unseen, secret human chemistry effectuates nature's prime directive. At an inaudible frequency, a rhythm hums away in the background. The attraction between them grows. They stay together talking all through the next morning and into the following evening, sometimes resting or napping in each other's arms. The attachment between them grows. Awestruck over the frictionless meshing of their complementary dispositions, the depth of their mutual attraction, and the extreme randomness by which they would actually be forced to meet, finding themselves purely by an unlikely, singular, miraculously lucky accident, they contemplate the unimaginable odds. Both conclude that their meeting is so spectacular it must be fate. It's fate which pulled them together. Excited by these realizations and other emotions, they are both energized and stay together another day, going to a nearby beach to bathe, then continuing to walk around after sunset, talking, kissing, napping, dining, teasing, jokingly embarrassing each other, being affectionate to one another, and simply, happily be together, as it is meant to be. Each time they return to analyze the situation, they reach the same conclusion and marvel at the impossibility of it all. It must be fate which brought them together. They hold hands, talk, wander around aimlessly in this foreign section of town, or recuperate in new and interesting cafes well into the next day, with every experience further solidifying a conviction they were meant to be together. It's their fate. Agreeing wholeheartedly this is the way it is, that it's their destiny, and feeling this with such strong, unequivocal certainty, they decide to test whether or not it's really fate which pulled them together. If it was to be, then it will be. If truly, purely fate, they reasoned, then fate surely would truly bring them together again. To remove all doubt or any question, once and for all, now and forever, they agreed to a plan of not exchanging contact information. Instead, they'd part from each other that day, knowing only but their first names, and allow meeting again entirely, purely, up to fate. So it is when at the end of the long holiday weekend they separate, they do so looking back until the last moment, with hearts filled with love for each other, and anxiously looking forward to the day fate soon reunites them. Thus, with no further contact information exchanged, only the first name and the collective images of a person are mentally inscribed on walls surrounding a newly created mental memorial flame. Sipping on a seemingly inexhaustible fuel supply, a fire burns brightly enough inside both of them, each individual blaze pining to feel the warmth of its twin. The years pass with each remaining solely available for the other, for they so truly and deeply believed they'd soon enough see each other again, each impatiently waiting for fate to prove their already deeply felt convictions correct. Every day, their first semi-conscious waking thought postulated a destiny where fate stages their anticipated glorious reunion. Haunting their contemplations at day's end, regardless of successes or accomplishments, an indistinct feeling that something important which desperately needed addressing was missing from the day's activities. Just before going to sleep, as one normally does, they mulled the thoughts, interactions, experiences, and emotions the day brought. For them, though, additional murky and muddled feelings of undefinable grief and disappointment got added into this mix. Slipping into sleep, their psyche would frequently terrorize them with demonically disjointed, disturbingly Stygian dreams about depravity, abandonment, and loss. Some nights, waking in a foggy state, they'd imagine their true love there next to them. Then, with eyes opening wide, they'd find themselves staring like they once did into the bottomless pupils of their lover's eyes, only here, their vision, having to first adjust to the dark, finds itself staring into lonely emptiness. Oh, the tricks the mind will play in such circumstances. Despite the melancholy, their conviction stayed strong, each day awakening with renewed vigor and fresh hopefulness. More years go by. Each has several fleeting, shallow relationships, unwilling to attach because of a still lingering devotion, a powerful attraction to the other, and a fierce yearning to meet again, and when they did so, have it be without further restrictions, complications, or obstacles. Too many years go by. Eventually, each gives in, concluding their assumptions were very painfully wrong, and in time, settle for an acceptable somebody they met with whom they somewhat resonated and felt a marginal attraction for, and were maybe moderately harmonious with. Each builds families with the acceptable somebody. Throughout that time, cognitive cracks would open and shine a projector's bright beam on the silver screens inside their heads, distracting their focus away from whatever mental activity they were at that exact moment engaged in. Then they'd find themselves in short order, recalling the memories of that long, intense holiday weekend. They'd remember that feeling of deep connection, that feeling of true resonance, that feeling of perfect harmony, that feeling they still craved more of. They'd remember walking around town, holding hands everywhere they went. They'd recall how they'd stopped to embrace for no other reason than to expose more of their physical bodies to each other. Not just for the titillating thrill of it, but to communicate with their unified body language to everyone everywhere, looking upon them where they stood, their mutual feelings of inextricable love and deep emotional closeness. They'd mentally replay every conversation to hear that voice they so missed echo around in their craniums again. They laugh internally, viscerally, over and over at every humorous moment, re-experiencing the funniness each time as anew. On bright white or pitch black mental canvases, they'd create an exquisite, highly detailed replica of their true love's pupil, iris, and sclera, and pause to soak in its endless beauty before compulsively redrawing it again, this time from a fresh angle or under new lighting conditions. Sometimes the still images transformed into animations, often of the eyes smiling, or focusing intensely like an eagle, or satisfactorily returning to a place of comfort, tranquility, and warmth brought on by the relief of seeing the other so close. Or the view would slowly zoom out to reveal all of that precious, alluring face. This process would go on for other facial features and bodily identifiers, using every hue and shade, every stroke, every texture, every composition, every style, every tone, ever known. Particularly meaningful replays and recollections would be revisited often. Sometimes these machinations would get stuck in a loop, repeating the recollection for as long as time allowed before real-time external forces, the life built with the acceptable somebody, interrupted the soothing mental retreat. Over the course of building lives on separate paths, each would individually from time to time run off, sneak away, in the guise of an always undefined personal errand. He always wearing the same hat, her always carrying the same purse. They'd return to that one city square they had once upon a one-time journey gone to. Reaching that spot, they'd then retrace in perfect order the exact steps and walk through the mass of people as done on that one fateful day. Sometimes they bring with them charms or talismans, then purposefully position them in strategic locations, or scatter them over the area where they'd first met. Or, after facing heavenward and mouthing a chant with precise articulation, they would toss the totems into a nearby fountain. When moving through the crowd, they'd sometimes hold their heads high and actively scan the bypassers with such a curious and intense stare, it forced a reaction of curiosity from its recipient target. Other times, they'd tilt their head forward, chin against their chest, so as to still adeptly move through the crush while simultaneously praying, using lucid body language to show deference to all deities or celestial cosmic forces above. Each attempt to get fate to bend to their will by means of gifts or conjuring some extraterrestrial ethereal entity to mercifully collaborate Sucor ended unmercifully with our hero and our maiden walking home alone with nothing in their hands or arms to hold joyously. Instead, their clenched fists displayed their visceral pain felt internally, or they gripped themselves tightly with heads and shoulders drooping even lower in humble expression, praying even harder and stronger than before with broad, unambiguous body language for relief through deliverance or at least divine intervention. Their kids grow up and leave the house. Outliving those moderately harmonious partners they'd married, both grow into lackluster old age living discouragingly alone. One warm spring day, they again each find themselves unusually presented with a direct and purposeful, enterprising task asked of them by some external authority that by chance plots them in this city's map, footing a path once again through that particularly populated section of town, through the very same square as before. The square is still the most crowded and busy square of this megacity. Moving his way through the horde from one side and her from the other, they again bump somewhere near the middle, and again with such a force that his hat falls off and she drops her purse. They each politely, carefully bend down and recover the once visually distinguishing and identifiable, now color-faded, time-worn, and tatty object for the other, while rising to return the item, and after a brief delay allowing for their vision to find the appropriate focus distance through their bifocal lenses, their aged eyes meet again. Their faces, softened and melted by time, are distorted forms of the mental picture each had for the other, their features around the orbital socket hinting at a lifetime of dysynthemia. Now wearing prescription spectacles, skin covered in wrinkles and freckles, and bearing the other effects from sun and stress, they at first do not recognize the other, so pause but for a long moment. A tingle of recognition starts to form from reviewing those captivating pupils, irises, and sclera. It sparks sputters, spits, then streams burning sanguine sparkles like a roadside emergency flare igniting. Their mature brains spin up with activity. They study each other's faces with added adventuresome curiosity. This flare, it drops and falls on the floor in the rearmost back room inside each of their heads, landing precisely on the leading seeds of a long deliberately poured black powder fuse. The ignition flashes to life and begins its wavering journey. From the back room, the fuse burns through the open doorway into vaulted rooms and other catacombed regions of subconscious memory deep below the structures of their minds. Dancing its way through nearly forgotten and unused chambers, it moves slowly, chewing up the incendiary mounds of powder, leaving behind a blackened, jagged line of ash and soot everywhere it goes. The fuse burns on in the background of their minds while their physical pause and the acute staring well exceeds the polite customary grace period. Failing yet to fully achieve recognition, they say pleasantly formal good days and goodbyes and continue on their respective tasks. Arriving at the last subterranean chamber, the fuse winds up the worn stone spiral staircase of this monumental reliquary via carefully arranged, kerosene-saturated, bound together, torn tatters and shreds to the ground floor of higher cognizance. It's here at the base of the steps, continuing up to the belfry, the conflagration connects with another pre-poured black powder trail. Racing across this memorial library's dry, dusty marble floor, the crackling, popping, burning sizzle of the fiery reaction transpiring is the only sound echoing in this mind-bogglingly voluminous hall. The radiant glow emanating from the point of combustion is the only source of direct light. A stench of sulfur and carbonized smoke waves and lashes about, then hangs and lingers in the air behind. The ground-hugging noxious inferno passes the stacks of books on knowledge in the vaults of memory. It melts and singes a trench straight down the middle of each carpeted compartment in the grand hall of historical events. It mars the mica-bespeckled polished cement from one end to the other of the long gallery of pictures and portraits. It marches ceaselessly towards the monumentally spacious, columned central study hall where the trail ends at a sizable mound of all the remaining black powder. Impregnated within the mixture are homemade explosive devices, a large cache of good old reliable industrial-grade explosives, plus an assortment of domestically produced signature fireworks. The whole heaping pile surrounds a plinth topped with a figured sculpture dominating the center of this rotunda. This mountain of munitions sits on a brilliant, descriptive mosaic depicting a chronicled story stretching wall to wall, patiently awaiting a catalyst. Some of the visible handwritten labels on the explosive devices found here warn do not touch or state handle with care, then list the contents to include densely repressed, stifled emotions, tightly packed clusters of active ruminations, stockpiles of inflamed mental machinations, a well-known incendiary, and also included is a mysterious biological agent titled Top Secret Sodomization Inducer. The mastermind who rigged this explosion to happen remains unseen, but we can ascertain one thing for certain. They did this job alone as they've been this grand temple's only occupants since its creation. Clues reveal they've been here so long they've read and reread every text, thumbed every page until the corners curled and frayed, scrutinized every detail in every picture, in every collection. In addition to doing the maintenance work of maintaining these precious halls, arches, and hallowed chambers, from foundation to flying buttress. Every act of every moment carried out with deep love and devotion in monastic-like solitude. Other clues lead us to suspect they will be an older, anxious, perhaps bitter, persecuted, pain-filled soul. Indications are this person of interest is planning to use this blast to create an exit, a chance at a breakout after the roof and walls come down. If it goes wrong or otherwise fails, the tectonic event may trap them inside and result in turning this establishment of exalted splendor and adulation into a dark bastille of broken walls, collapsed ceilings, and smashed apart uneven floors. However, if events line up in time and execute correctly in proper sequence, it might manifest a chance to escape this place and finally be reunited with the one they long for, the one they love most, and begin building a new life, now together again, as it always was meant to be. What triggers this chain of events which might lead to the desired outcome? Facial recognition, of course. If that face they long to see again, of which only one physical representation ever existed in the entire span of humanity, presents itself before the ocular viewports to the world, the dormant parts of the neural network wake up and go to work processing. After a moment lasting the length of uncertainty, if the face of the person presented matches the reference image's last known descriptive features, a reaction occurs. This reaction responds by pulling a leveraging mechanism that lifts the restraining gates below a colossal tank of cerebral fluid perched strategically on thick timber scaffolding high above the bell tower. This liquid drops into a tapering sluice, which concentrates the stream to amass the pressure required to draw back the log-shaped blunt cast steel mallet of a water hammer to a tipping point. It then slings it through the air on creaky, rusty, heavy chains and slams into a large, heavily patinated primal bronze bell with an alarmingly loud, thunderous gong. The ringing claymore from this clangor channels into a wide, drain-like, smooth, conical opening flush with the floor directly under the bell. The reverberation resonates through a dusty, tarnished brass acoustic tube down the tower through the main dwelling, echoing directly into the subterranean vaults, chambers, and quarters. The vibration is picked up by a listening device placed over the hole in the ceiling where the acoustic tube terminates, programmed and calibrated to actuate only if the tone detected is the exact tuned musical note of the bell. A now closed circuit relays an electromagnetic signal to a motor opening the ball valve of a conduit piping gas to the internal eternal flame. Despite feeling forsaken, this nostalgic fire has, until this exact moment, burned continuously without fail, brightly enough, exclusively in pilot light mode. As the fuel dosage increases, correspondingly the flame grows. A mirror-polished, parabolic, reflective radiant barrier focusing the thermals further amplifies the heat. The blaze reaches a previously unachievable height and temperature, sufficient to melt the protective cocoon of pericardium safety wax encasing a blood-red combustible rod. The rod contains a mixture of phosphorus, potassium nitrate, and sulfide, caked inside a crimson cardboard sleeve. Once lit, it is what causes the initial ignition. The chemical reaction brings to life the illumination flare, which, in turn, if dropped in the right spot, sets ablaze the fuse that will ultimately set off the pre-positioned charges. Note, like much of life, timing is critical. There will always be a limited window of opportunity to achieve success in these conditions. The older and slower one is, longer the process. Cross-referencing the face with images on file at first observation takes time. Their signaling demands more time. The fuse obviously necessitates time to burn. Although the explosive blast will finish in a flash, waiting for the pieces blasted into the cerebral heavens to come back down and land where they will need time to settle. Then there is the resulting dust cloud, which requires time to clear, as clear vision is essential to navigate through a space filled with uneven debris. Take too long in the window of opportunity. The time needed for all this to go right might close. Full consciousness sleeps unaware below ground, bunkering in its own headquarters. It is for the moment currently hidden safely where it's dark and completely sealed off, far from the place where this glowing illumination's trail comes to an end and soon flares into a giant flash with a powerful booming bang. The resident introjet takes cover, braces themselves, plugs their ears, slackens their jaw, and once again with renewed vigor and fresh hopefulness crouches ready to throw open the door if able once the debris settles. It takes both of them a few seconds after parting before their brains together at the exact same moment figuratively explode with the force of tons of TNT. The shockwave evokes arousal and a powerful evocation. An overwhelming range of sights, sensations, sounds, tastes, and smells hit them. Their minds permeate with extensive visions, both broad and moments in fine detail. They are plied with feelings of extreme joy, adulation, adoration, reverence, devotion, along with reactions, thoughts, findings, deductions, and conclusions. The colossal force dislodges all the deeply felt and the deepest sunken emotions of love and eros they still possess for each other. A secondary reaction of revelation recalls agreeing to that now fateful, painful, definitive decision made at the end of a splendid long holiday weekend ages ago. The resulting pressure wave from this aggravates prickly, hurtful memories of lifelong agony. It rips open unseen and unhealed abandonment wounds that accounted for this everlasting, unenviable pain. In a flash, both are for a second blinded to a world of anything else. It's in this exact moment. Each connects the face of the person they just saw with the face of the person they longed for so many years. Immediately, they are motivated to take action. If seen from above, they're pivoting around simultaneously, and this rabble appears like two synchronized swimmers rotating to face each other while treading turbulent waters. He cries out her name, Marka! She cries out, Polo! At this age, their voices are weakened, and the first call-out is but a disjointed, raspy, broken, dim voice. Each musters their strength, draws a deeper breath, stretches their aching bodies taller to project, readies their throat and vocal cords, and in panic-driven desperation cry out each other's names, persistently as best and loud as their voices can now manage. Marka! 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 Our hero repeats, waving his hat overhead as high as he can to be more distinguishable. Polo! 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 Our maiden repeats, holding her purse high like a flag, hoisting it skyward to be more identifiable. Concurrently vectoring to return to the point they'd just been, each struggles with all their might against the flow of countless busy people churning through the square. Yet their worn-down, frail bodies are presently incapable of maintaining position, let alone moving decidedly in any independent direction against the throng. Marka! Polo! They keep summoning to each other while searching through the weaving and blended blur of people swirling around them. They strive with all they have, searching the humanity, calling out each other's name, then pausing to leave space to hear that one voice, scanning the mass of people, hailing the name, followed by intense attentiveness, panning the crowd, proclaiming the name, then heartfully hearkening for a reply. They hunt, then cry, then hark, repeatedly. Though not very far apart, neither have the power in their voice to carry it far enough or lift it loud enough or have hearing sharp enough for the other to register the sound of their names and differentiate it from so many different voices, noises, and the other sounds in this overpopulated city's cacophony. All the while, the hurried people in this crowded square, intent on squeezing through as quickly as possible, thoughtlessly knocking into them, pressing and shoving, sweep them along. Struggling as they may against the flow, it is the movement of the crowd which now dictates where their time-haggard bodies go. The opposing currents of people sundering this couple apart, like polar opposite rip-tide undertows, sucking them against their might out to vast, empty, pitiless oceans on separate ends of the known world. Every ensuing moment, further in time, this guy, our hero, and this girl, our maiden, are split farther and farther apart and removed far away from each other. This is not my story. I command it to be made known throughout every cerebral introject and persons unknown to me. This is not my story. I will not have it be. Of all the people that ever physically existed in the entire span of humanity, that one who truly resonates harmoniously with me, you should know.